house that nobody claims, and it leads back to Randy and his girlfriend. The two are charged with burglary, but charges are also added for the armed robbery from before his stint as a Marine.
Oh.
Yeah. So he serves time in jail. It's about a week. Then he's ordered to stand trial. He pleads guilty at the trial, and he gets off with probation. So a few months later, he marries the girlfriend, whose name is Donna. They move around a bit while he jumps from job to job. He's just pretty much all the way around loser. She has a 4-year-old daughter when they marry, and eventually they have a son together. So his only natural child from any of his relationships. In February of 1980, he unexpectedly files for divorce from Donna. She would testify at the trial later on. She had no idea why. She thought their relationship was great. She had no idea, and it caught her like out of the blue. He filed for divorce, and that was that. He didn't even give her a reason. Yeah.
Okay.
By late 1980 to early 1981, he meets his next wife at a Parents Without Partners meeting, which absolutely kills me because Gary Ridgway met one of his wives at those meetings too. So like the number of sexual predators and murderers and serial killers at those meetings, it just must have been like extraordinary.
Wow. Yeah.
It's yeah. So
but it's a group where people I guess they're kind of vulnerable. They're single moms with children, and they're looking for partner. You know what I mean? Yeah. They're like looking to talk. And
right. And
for a sociopath, that's just
it's a field day.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think that the two of them would have ever like crossed paths necessarily because of the timeline of things. But it just, I don't know, kind of just small circle, I guess, of serial killers and murderers. So he meets his second wife, whose name is Janice Miranda, and the two are married and move in together in the spring of 1981. She also has a daughter from a previous marriage. The very month that they are married, Janice's car, which is a Pinto.
Sweet.
Like another total classic 70s car, is reported missing, and he collects a decent insurance policy on it.
Yeah.
What later comes to light is that he may have taken the car to where he worked and caught it on fire.
Oh.
He was actually let go from a job because he started a fire there. They suspect it might have been her car because he was trying to get rid of the evidence. He then starts to control the marriage, and friends notice that Janice just isn't acting like herself.
Okay.
So in September, the couple purchases a home in Mount Lake Terrace, which, from what I can gather, was a very nice area then, and it still kind of is. They have this new pretty home, and our friend Randy insists that they get a $100,000 term life insurance policy because he says, in case the worst happens.
On her or just him?
It's on both of them.
Okay.
In case the worst happens, the house will be safe if something happens. So the policy took effect November 7th of 1981, and Janice would be dead just 20 days later from a fall of over 300 feet off of Beacon Rock.
Wow.
Yeah. So they're hiking.
Surprised it lasted 20 days.
Well, he had to plan it.
Oh.
They were hiking on the day after Thanksgiving. And he says that they were on this narrow, treacherous part of the hike, and he was trying to help her, took her hand, and she slipped, and she just fell to her death. The only witness is Randy, and you would have to. This was before cell phones. I don't even know if now to this day you would get cell phone service out there, but he had to leave her to go get help.
Yeah.
Somebody mentioned that in a news article and mentioned it like, well, he left her to die. Well, he'd have to leave.
Yeah.
He'd have to, you know.
And at that time, you'd have to find a payphone.
Right.
Hopefully you had a quarter.
Or, you know, you'd have to find where the nearest, like, because I'm assuming this is like some sort of national park, so there's a person working there, you know. The story is really sketchy that he gives authorities, and it's contradictory at some times of him telling it. So officials question him, and they suspect that, you know, she didn't fall.
Yeah.
They kind of do like reenactments, and it just would not have been possible. It took them hours to find her body.
Jeez.
Yeah. So unfortunately, they can't prove anything. Obviously, after a fall, you've passed away.
Yeah.
So there's no, you know, disproving that. That's what happened. They couldn't find anything that might have happened prior to the fall, like any injuries that might have been prior to that.
Yeah.
So they don't have any significant proof. So the very next day, Randy arranges for Janice to be cremated, and he files an insurance claim on their policy for the $100,000, and he doesn't tell anybody, including her daughter, that she's dead.
Okay.
Her daughter that lived with them would later testify that her mom, just a few days prior to this incident, would show her where some money and checks were hidden in an envelope behind a dresser drawer.
Yeah.
And that if anything were to happen to her, that her daughter was supposed to take it. And at the time, her poor daughter is 7 years old. She doesn't understand what her mom is trying to tell her.
Yeah.
And she said, nothing's going to happen to you, Mommy. And it just broke my heart because something really bad did happen.
But
she wasn't even notified. It was like a week later, he fakes a phone call or gets off the phone. And he said, you know, hey, that was the hospital that called your mom's dead. And that was it. So, I mean, I don't know exactly what story he had given everybody, but it wasn't that she was dead and that he had her cremated. It was possibly like, hey, she fell and she's in the hospital and nobody can see her.
But, like, what I don't get is if you're telling your 7-year-old daughter that here's some money and some checks, if something happens to me, then take it and run. But
yeah,
if you were in such a bad situation, why wouldn't you just take the money and run?
Right. Yeah.
I don't understand. If you feared for your life that much to make an escape plan for your daughter. Okay.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, her daughter knew that much. Maybe she had an escape plan and this happened before she could execute it. Maybe she just hadn't shared that with anybody.
But I mean, if you're already to that point,
yeah,
it's done.
I mean,
if you're
she was
fearing
afraid
for your life, that if something happens to me, take the money and go.
Maybe she was too afraid to tell anybody.
Yeah,
it's hard to know. It's just really hard to know.
Yeah.
So when the daughter, after that phone call, and he finally fesses up that, you know, the mom is dead. When the daughter tries to go and get the money like Janice told her, Randy caught her and he took it. She ended up going to live with her biological father about 3 days after that in Texas, and she never saw a penny of it. Randy apparently had promised, like, oh, I'll send you like her school records and you know, all of her stuff and her toys, and they never got any of it. Never got any of her mom's things. Got nothing. So finally, the news of her death is made public.
Yeah.
And on December 5th, a memorial service is held for her. So by April of 1982, he has his insurance payout and he buys a new house. 2 years later, he sells that one. He buys another house. While living in that house, he makes friends with some of his neighbors called the Godwins. He promptly begins having a sexual relationship with their young daughter, who was a minor.
Sweet.
Yeah. He gets away with it for a while, even though her parents acknowledge later on that they knew about it.
And is this in the same place? Mountain.
Washington, yeah.
Or where'd they move?
Oh, you're talking about Mount Lake?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I believe this house is still in that area. So Godwin, later on when he's questioned before the trial for what happens later on, he also would note that Randy claimed to be like a hardened Vietnam vet. And he would relay stories about that would just for some reason, Godwin had like this suspicion that he was bullshitting him. Godwin was an actual Vietnam vet, and he just pretty much knew it. Anything that Randy was saying was bullshit.
Nice.
Right. During this time, Randy was also screwing his son's babysitter, and that husband knew about it as well, but didn't say anything and let it continue on until one night he came home and they were laying in front of the fireplace at the wife and the husband's house. And he was like, if you don't get out of here and leave my wife alone, I will go to the authorities. I'm done with this. But what I can gather is everybody seemed really scared of Randy. They were scared and didn't know what he was capable of doing. So everybody tiptoed around him. The neighbor would actually commit insurance fraud with him at one point. So I think he was also scared that he didn't want to go, he didn't want to get in trouble with that.
Yeah. Charged with insurance fraud.
Right. So wife number 3 comes into the picture in 1985. Randy meets another Donna Clift, while shopping in a convenience store, and the relationship is like a blip. It's quick. They marry in May, and in September, they're divorced. Same year. She claims that he was a dick she had a 3-year-old daughter the entire time they were married. And after Randy takes the family on a rafting trip that ended with Donna like afraid for her life, she says, yeah, no, thank you, motherfucker. I'm out. And that's the end of that.
She's smart.
She got smart real quick. Not long after that, Randy tries to find wife number 4 in a woman named Mary Jo Phillips. And everything seems to be going really well. She is very enamored of him. He doesn't really talk about himself much, and she doesn't know anything about wife number 2. But when he mentions to her that, he really wants her to get a life insurance policy before they get married, she tells him, I am uninsurable. I had cancer, and I cannot get a life insurance policy. He grows cold, ends the relationship, and she didn't hear from him again. And that was that. Wow. So she really lucked out. From about 1984 to 88, Randy has about 4 different jobs. He gets fired from each one. In 89, he is in court because an insurance company tried to nullify a policy that he had, stating that he had committed fraud. Somehow, this asshole ends up walking away with $30,000 from the insurance company. So he ends up monetarily gaining from their lawsuit on him.
It's probably just a settlement. Shut up, go away.
So then in 1990, wife number 4 comes into his life. This is kind of where it's tragic. So the two meet while at a Little League game for their kids. She has 2 sons that are around the same age as his son, a little bit younger than his son.
Yeah.
Her name is Cynthia Baumgartner. She is the perfect target for his schemes, basically. She had previously been married, but her husband had passed away from Hodgkin's disease. So she was left pretty well off from, their policies and things that she had. Randy, kept his prior relationships a secret from her because she kind of is religious and doesn't want to marry a divorced man. She doesn't believe in divorce, essentially. So he tells her about Janice's death, but not about the other 2 wives. So essentially, he's a clean slate. And of course, he doesn't mention the insurance fraud or any of that. The two are married just a few short months later, and they begin their new life with Randy selling his home